Welcome to the show today. My name is Douglas Gable. I'm here with my good friend John Barnwell. We're going to be talking about a new book that has just come out on Amazon. It's one of our 24 books you can find on Amazon. It's called The Etherization of the Blood. Now, I'm going to give you a warning up front that this is the deepest secrets that you can find in any spiritual path. These are the secrets of ascension. And we've given them to you before from different points of view in the Eternal Ethers, in the second book of the Gospel of Sophia, and in the human heart as a supersensible organ. But today we're going to talk about it from the perspective that we put it in this book, which is essentially if you have done your preparation, if you have reached the stage of enlightenment, in my opinion, that means you know you're immortal, which is not all that hard to do. Then you're ready for the stages of initiation. And in the stages of initiation, it doesn't really matter how you approach it from whatever tradition, it's the same exact thing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the ethers, and we're going to talk about plasma, and we're going to talk about the process of ascension. Welcome to the show today, John.
Well, hello, Douglas, and it's always a great deal of joy, really. I'd say that to get to this point in our journey, because really, if the way I look at it, all the other books that we've put together are all preparation for reading this one.
I would have to agree. I wasn't bold enough to say that, but yes, I'd have to say that. So get ready because in this first talk, we're going to be laying the foundation for what will then come in the second talk is the deeper secrets of the etherization of the blood, which I'm going to go ahead and share some new research I'm doing. A new book that I'm creating is in response to the furor of people out there responding to Robert Temple's book, A New Science of the Heavens or New Science of Heaven, where he talks about plasma. And then you have to ask the question, how does plasma relate to ethers? Well, to begin with, you can look anywhere you want. And the only place you're going to find anything about the ethers that is applicable in today's world is from Anthroposophists. And that's what's in this book. We basically synthesized everything about the etherization of the blood into one place so that you can look at this. And if you went to the other places where I told you you could find references to them, you probably wouldn't understand what you're reading because it's not clear. It assumes that you have a tremendous understanding of anthroposophy. And that's what the previous 20 books are all about. It's getting you ready to understand. Uh, well, really, those were also some of the most prevalent questions of people. What happens when we sleep? What happens when we die? What is spirituality? Is there a spiritual world? What are the different bodies that we have? How do we respond to this apocalyptic age? What is evil? How do we wrestle with evil? All these things are really, they are the preliminaries. That is, in fact, the moral preparation and the preparation of your mind to be able to understand what we're going to talk about, which really truly are the greatest secrets of any path of initiation that you can find. And so I'll ask you, John, is there any other book that you can find this material in that you know of? Because you know more about books than anybody.
Well, to be perfectly honest, no. I mean, there's bits and pieces, but nobody has had the what do we call it, perspicacity to think to even put this together because it's really, if you get down to it, and of course, it's funny because, for example, in the lecture Etherization of the Blood, right? In that lecture, Rudolf Steiner makes the point that when one develops that stream that develops between the heart and the centers in the head, that what happens is that that stream unites with the etheric stream of Christ. And it's like, I mean, when you read that, and it's so profound that I'm sure most people just kind of, it really goes over their head, because really what you're doing is you're entering into what St. Paul kept making as a point. He said, not I, but Christ in me. He meant it literally. It wasn't a metaphor.
And you can approach that from a philosophical point of view, which we have in the books. From a mechanical point of view, believe it or not, you can even, and unfortunately, yes, after we say this today, it's almost guaranteed that if any of the dark offices of our government get a hold of this, they'll turn it into a weapon. But they already have. And the reason I can now speak about some of these things is because recently, with these appearance of plasma balls all over the earth, dropping out of the sky, doing things that demonstrate that they are not made of atoms, they're not made of substance, they're made of something else. And they can go infinite speeds, they can create lights of different colors, they can appear to have mitosis right in front of you, they're dividing, they're self-replicating, they're self-motivating. And so people are just going nuts with this. So I had to do a lot of research in the last few weeks on this. And now I have found, basically, after reading this book on the plasma theory by Robert Temple, I've found that these people they really come up very, very far short of understanding the full picture. And it takes a while to understand the full picture. I think I've been studying this for about 50 years, and I'm just now coming to all kinds of shocking revelations that I should have had, many years ago, because it's actually quite simple. What happens in our earth and what happens in our body is the same thing. There's cosmic nutrition coming in at our poles through magnetism, which is called chemical ether, and going deep into the earth called life ether. And the dynamic of life ether and chemical ether are the same exact substance that feed us in this process of the etherization of the blood, as Steiner called it, also at other times called it the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream. Now, I just want to make a few references here. It was Carl Koenig in Earth and Man who gives you an explanation of this using the chemicals that are involved, the elements that are involved. And that's it's pretty good. You can also go to Gunter Voxmuth's book, The Etheric Formative Forces, in what is it, Man, Earth, and something else anyway. And then he's got a second book called The Etheric Formative Forces in Science, Art, and Religion. Well, those are the books that these things are in, but they're in between the lines, and they are hidden occult secrets. Now, Steiner knew a lot of occult secrets that he didn't give out. And in our book on the human heart as a supersensible organ of perception, we give out the secrets of the fifth chamber, the sixth, and the seventh chamber, which happen to be directly linked to what we're talking about with the etherization of the blood. Now, I don't know any way to explain this to people except just, I'm up here on this high, high mountain, and I'm going to rush down to the valley and tell you about this and then take you back up to the mountain. Well, it's an incredibly difficult task because you can study this all your life and only come to the limitations of your own concepts. And in most cases, we are materialists. Certainly scientists are materialists. So when you want to talk about a plasma, which they do, and there's a lot of scientific research on it, what do they say? It is non-atomic. It is not made of atoms. It creates toroids, which are donut-shaped fields, which are electromagnetic, fantastically charged. They can change one particle into another inside of themselves. And these are plasmoids. They're called complex dusty plasmoids. And they can appear in the outer realm in cold light. And we'll talk about that when we get into more detail. And they can appear also in organic life. And then they can appear as basically the incubators, the nursery for the type of atomic particles that we need on the earth to sustain our life, including oxygen and hydrogen, and then water and phosphorus, carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen, and sulfur sometimes. So those elements right there create a nutrition stream to the earth that is not understood at all. I was shocked. In 1972, when I first came across plasma in a book by Ben Bova, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And I finally said to myself, and I was young at that time, someone explains what I see all the time. Amazing. And I know that it's not physical matter. And they still don't understand it. They stand in awe of plasma. So let me just make a few clear remarks about plasma. It's not the plasma of your blood, but that's also connected to this. It's not protoplasm, which is the substance of your cells, but the reason they name things plasma probably to confuse you, is because they don't understand plasma. And if they did, then they'd understand the descent of the spirit into the physical world. And this is exactly what's happening in the etherization of the blood. It is a system of feeding the gods, and the gods feed us. We take all of our sense perception, digest the content of it, especially the mineral content of it, and we offer it up through our heart in an etherized stream that goes to our head and bathes the pineal gland. And what it bathes the pineal gland with is ionized particles, etherized particles of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, and phosphorus. Now, that process then does something which Rudolf Steiner had predicted that in our age they would try to stop. They want to stop this process of ascension. How do they stop it? They put fluorochloride in our water. It's a deadly poison. If you look at a container with the fluoride, what people call fluoride, it's actually fluorochloride, which is a byproduct of working with chloride. It is a poison. But what does it do? It calcifies your pineal gland. So this is what Steiner was talking about, that as soon as you're born, they're going to turn you into an adult, a clever adult, humans. And that this would happen around our time. Actually, he talked about the turn of the millennium. And so he said that in this time, we'd be able to stop people from having spiritual thoughts because we would, in fact, give them, he says, an injection or food or medicines that cause them to have their pineal gland put the wrong type of calcium in it. There's 3 types of calcium in the pineal gland: calcium calcite, calcium sulfite, and calcium carbonate, carbonic calcium, or calcium carbonate. The calcium carbonate crystals are the opposite of what happens in the calcification of your pineal gland through drinking fluoridated water. It is evil. And so when you look at that, and of course, we were looking at this, when we were little boys, right, John, and saying, why do they do this? This is stupid. This is poison. But then so is sugar, and so is tobacco, and so is alcohol, and so is a lot of things. So, I just now read the newest reports. After just in the last few months, they came out and they said numerous municipalities are stopping the fluoridation of water. Now they've come out and said, no, once again, the CDC and the NIH says there's nothing wrong with putting fluoride in the water. Now, your heart, as we describe in this book, Etherization of the Blood, which is taken from Rudolf Steiner's book called The Etherization of the Blood. Did I do that on purpose? Yes. Because you can read that book and not understand hardly any of it. You can read Karl Koenig and go, what the heck is he talking about? Or you can read any of the books on ethers. Right now, the big deal is that ethers are, that there's over 24 different theories of everything created by modern scientists and physicists and theorists who say that everything comes from the ethers. But what they do is they lump it all into one ether. And so they create etherons or ether waves or ether this or ether that or ether. But they don't get to the point that there's 7 ethers. And the number one book out there that, if you were to ask the scientific community, is about this topic, it's Ervin Laszlo. I'll show you the book, but it's in all of our bibliographies, Science in the Akashic Field, and the subtitle, An Integral Theory of Everything. Now, a toe, theory of everything. How come in our book, The Eternal Ethers, a theory of everything, do we use the same term? Because good old Irving Laszlo addressed one ether, the Akashic ether. There are, let's count them, 7 ethers. He missed 6 of them. And yet it's the predominant theory. It's called quantum vacuum or 0 point theory. And this is where all of science is going, because why? They're using plasmas, ethers, to create containment for fusion so they can get fusion energy, but they also use plasmas to create devices that can clear up your skin, that can fix your teeth. They use plasma. They have plasma arc guns that you can shoot people with a Tesla arc from basically a Tesla plasma gun. They also have this in the military. So they have plasma bombs. They have plasma rail guns. They have plasma laser. They have plasma filament creators. They have every type of plasma imaginable. And yet there's never been a single speck of research on it that shows what it is, whether it helps humans, whether it doesn't, whether it can be found in the human body or whether it can't, how it works in the plasmosphere, how it works in the exosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere. None of that. None of that is really known. It's mostly speculation. So what we're going to do today is try to wrap this up for you so that you can see a picture of it, to realize that the ethers, as Rudolf Steiner tells us, and Gunther Foxmuth in Etheric Formative Forces, that it creates the whole universe. And we humans are nothing more than a step down transformation of ethers. Science would call it plasmas and ethers. But essentially, what it is we're telling you in these books how you can picture your plasmic nature inside yourself so that you can stimulate it, because that is the very exact thing that is used in spiritual ascension or spiritual development, is to work on this stream that John started off the show with, from the heart to the head. And it's called biomineralization, when we deposit calcium carbonate crystals in our pineal gland, which is directly proportional to your IQ. And science used to say you come in with all of the brain sand, all these crystals in your pineal gland when you're born, and you can't add any. That isn't correct. Oh, it's been demonstrated. It's called biomineralization. So what we're telling you is what Steiner told us to do: study all that he has to give us, work with the spiritual beings who gave it to him, and then try to link it to modern research and discoveries, because that is the future of humanity.
Yes, and don't be intimidated when we explore some of the scientific side of it, especially Douglas, who's gone deeper into this than anybody I know. And so it's just a great opportunity to be able to approach a daunting subject. But keep in mind that another way that one can approach this topic of the etherization of the blood, you could read the fairy tale of the lily and the green snake, because it's in there. And when you get to certain archetypal understandings, where Rudolf Steiner says that if you don't feel like you can deal with the details and all of the scientific nomenclature, that you can approach it artistically, that in studying myths and legends, it can prepare you so that in a future incarnation, you will be able to understand spiritual science. And he says that people that are addressing the people that were with him, he said, it's because they're familiar in their previous incarnations with certain myths and legends and archetypal stories that were created like a seeding process by the great initiates to be able to give us the imaginal power, so that when we get to this point in history, we can break out of that cage of materialistic thought. And so who shows up but plasma? And plasma, they keep trying to treat it as if it was matter, but it's not. It's a life process. And when they look at it like that, they miss the point, because basically you could look at it as like, when you approach the plasma, you're approaching the garment of a divine spiritual being.
Yes, so true, John. And really, these are the secret teachings of all traditions. But you won't find them unless you go into the very, very deepest aspects of it. For instance, I studied Tibetan Buddhism for many years, and still incorporate some of the practices because they're actually very Christian practices. And in that, and in our books, we describe the Tibetan approach to this. But now I'd like to describe 3 approaches to the same thing and do what John just said. We don't have to get into the modern day materialistic elemental chart to explain this stuff. We're going to give you 3 images, one from India, one from Greece, and one from modern times, which really the Roman Catholic Church is not modern times. They're a mixture of a bunch of pagan practices, which they synthesized into syncretic. What's it called? Syncretic. They are syncretic. They basically have merged all the good stuff together in one place. So in ancient India, it's been known for 10,000 years. And when I was clairvoyant, when I was young, up until that time I was 54, I saw this thing going on to the body, and I used it to help heal people and counsel people. And, I worked with an exorcist, as you all may know if you listen to our interviews called Interviews with an Exorcist that John did with myself. And when I saw this stuff going on, I'm going, how come nobody else sees this? I could see they didn't, because I'd ask questions and people didn't know. And I'd ask spiritual people and they didn't know. And I'd ask all these questions and they'd go, no. And I'd say, well, look at the wings of the heart. Don't you see the wings on the heart? Doctors, you cardiologists, don't you see the wings in the heart? And every single cardiologist, and I've talked to a lot since I had my heart attacks, tells me there's no such thing as an auricle in the heart. Well, the auricle in the heart are the wings of the heart, the 6th and 7th chambers of the heart. But this is the way it is with everything. So what I'm about to describe as these images, these are archetypal visualizations you can do, which actually promote the enhancement of this process of earthly and spiritual nutrition, or the etherization of the blood. In ancient Hindu belief, they said that there were 3 channels going up your spine. And it started for the man in the bottom right-hand side of their spine at the foundation chakra, and the woman on the left-hand side. And it goes up and they cross 3 times and they get to the heart. And then they go up further and they cross 3 times up here and they go over the chakras. Every time they go over a chakra, they cross these 3 channels. One in the middle is called Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, male, female, and the mix of the 2, white, red. And when they mix in the heart, it creates a pink drop, which is stored in the box of your heart, which is where your karma is stored. It's called the treasure of the heart of the hearts. And then it goes from the heart and goes through the throat chakra, the brow chakra, the crown chakra, 3 more chakras. And then what happens, it turns down, because these are really the forces, serpent forces. These are the physical forces that you have in your chakras, all of them. When they all align, starting from the bottom, and they go all the way up, and they turn around at the crown chakra and come out to a point right here where a tetrahedron comes out and a rainbow comes out, when you have actually accomplished the task, because it's now stimulating the pituitary gland. It went up, it turned at the pineal, turned down into the pituitary gland. And when that serpent burst of energy, which people have had, which made them crazy and got them locked up in psych wards, many, many, many people, I can't tell you how many people I've had to counsel over the fact that they've had Kundalini bursts in their body at a young age, and it completely fried their nerves and gave them a psychological, neurological, physical breakdown. So it's a serpent. It's a serpent because, and many times it's a poisonous serpent, right? The hooded cobra. Well, that's half of the process, okay? So Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, how do you stimulate the Kundalini? Well, according to the teachings, you stimulate it by using your lower chakras to create a fire that goes into those 3 channels, which melts the frost, as they call it, on the sides of the channels. And when they come together and they meet, and the frost meets, it meets in the middle channel. And this happens 3 times. And once it goes through these 3 processes, it drops a pink drop of morality in your heart. Okay. And then it goes on up to the upper 3 and can drop things in your brain. I won't go into that, but it can cause excretions in your lateral and the lateral ventricles of your brain and such things like that, because of all the fire that goes up there, right? Well, you don't really need a lot of fire in the head. If you get too much fire in the head, you can have a problem. And that's what Kundalini can do. Well, that is from what they call the fierce woman. So in martial arts, you take your two fingers, you put it 2 fingers below your belly button. Right there, there's a vase that's open. It's the begging bowl of the Buddha, is what it's called. And the begging bowl of the Buddha is made of metal because it has to be heated from the bottom, from your sex chakra and your foundation chakra, until it completely heats up. But you have to, through your breath, retain part of your breath, retain carbon, because you're taking in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. But instead of breathing out all the carbon dioxide, if you can transform it, you can keep part of it, and it becomes a special superheated substance that goes in this begging bowl, and you put the lid on it and you cook it until it gets really hot. It's called the fierce woman, the tumo. There's many names for it. The fire in the belly, the chi, all this stuff. And then it goes up into your other chakras until the heart through these channels. And then once it gets there, it turns into something a little bit different. But it starts to go through the higher chakras. The lower chakras below your heart, you were supposed to have already developed in past incarnations. If you haven't, then you're a laggard. Sorry. If you don't have good foundation of food and water and health and all that kind of stuff, and you don't know who you are sexually, or you're still chasing sex and lust still rules you, you're not going to be able to do what we're talking about. If you don't have your, like martial arts, if you don't have your body energy together, your whole body energy in the chi, no. If you go up to the solar plexus, by the way, there's 10,000 chakras. All your palms have chakras. So when I'm talking about the 7 chakras, I'm talking about kind of a 7-fold version of it that relate to the planets, which is a good way to relate it. So then you go up to the solar plexus, and that has to do with, have you resolved problems with your friends and family? If you haven't, you're not going to get to your heart. Sorry, the heat's not going to get to your heart. And then from that point on, oh, no, the heart becomes the supersensible organ. Now, I'm going to throw this in because I have to. All of that is sensed by your vagus nerves, which has 2 parts, a left and a right. Your vagus nerve goes into all your major organs, all the things I just described. The Tibetans say it's 1 chakra down there, right at your belly button. It's 64 petals. All the lower chakras are supposed to be into 1. And that's all supposed to be creating a fire to desire enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. That you attain enlightenment for the sake of all other sentient beings. That's the highest fire you can have, the highest desire that'll create the biggest fire you can get down there. When you take the lid off, it releases this fire. But if you don't have morality in your heart, if you don't have some pink drops from your previous incarnations in your heart, in the treasure casket of your heart, the cube of your heart, this inviolable area that nothing can touch because that's where your real nature is, and the heart is the universe turned inside out. If you don't have that, you can't go any further. Well, that's the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve goes up there, and it goes across 2 things. The left and right goes across the sinoatrial node and the sinoatrial ventricular node. And that's where they say all the energy in your body comes from to cause your heart to beat. It's the pacemaker of the heart. No, the vagus nerve is the pacemaker of the heart. It brings up to that supersensible organ of the heart all the information it needs. And if you don't have that, if you can't say that you can look at your lower chakras and say, yes, I developed the petals from the past through morality, and I've developed the petals for the present through morality, then when you look at the heart, you don't see it for what it is. It's actually the Holy Grail. It's a plasma ball in one way of looking at it. It's the place that Steiner calls the plasma germ cells and other different references he makes to them. Because why? Electricity doesn't come from biological energetic electricity, or bioenergy as they call it. That's complete nonsense. They will tell you that all that heat in your body, all that electricity in your nerves, and by the way, that science calls it electricity is just stupid. It's not electricity at all. It's bioelectric. and it's more plasmic than it is electric. As a matter of fact, the ethers stand as a opposite of electricity. So as you are working on looking at the energy in your body, the scientists will tell you it comes from every exchange from the surface of a cell to the inside of the cell where the mitochondrial DNA takes adenosine triphosphate and uses that for energy in the cell. Yeah, that's what causes the cell to work. And that's from the sodium and the potassium that cause calcium ion channels to enter into the cell. Same exact thing happens in these two nodes in the heart, in the right part of your heart. And when these things either get stimulated or not stimulated, damped down, they determine the beat of your heart. They determine your entire health. They determine everything. And it's in the book on the heart. Matter of fact, I'm going to hold up this book. You know why? Because Tyler got such a great picture for it. I just can't take not showing it. And this book will tell you more about the heart than cardiologists know. And I know because I've quizzed them on this book. I've given them this book, and they come back and they say, heart vortex rings? There's heart vortex rings? And then they go look it up and they say, all of heart science is focused now on heart vortex rings. What are they? Plasma toroid created by the flow of your blood across those two nodes. Those two nodes create a magnetohydrodynamic generator in your heart. And that's what creates your biofield in the heart. There's one down there where the begging bowl of Buddha does one. And then up in your head, we'll talk about that. There's another one. These three different ones work together, and they don't understand that at all. Every time they show this, they show different toroids, different donut shapes all connecting each other. And it's like, no, this isn't a replenitive field where you're taking what goes out of the top and it comes in the bottom. That's stupid. That makes no sense at all. Walter Russell showed us, a lot of other people, Steiner showed us, C.G. Harrison showed us, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I guess, if you give an analogy, it's like, you have a pitcher, you have a baseball game, you got the pitcher and the catcher. And they keep trying to make it like it's the catcher that's throwing the ball. And he's throwing it at, they have an inside out and backward approach to trying to understand these things. And they keep wanting, like I was reading a thing about plasma the other day, some scientist, and he was using it as a means to scoff at the super sensible aspects of the thing, because he was able to feel comfortable approaching it with like that equation mind, I guess you'd call it, that they think that if they could take and measure something, that therefore it goes into this unified field of their understanding. And so you have two tendencies. In occultism, they call it Nakiel and Sorath. And Nakiel wants you to dematerialize too soon, right? And that was prevented by the sun separating from the earth earlier in earth evolution. But the Sorath impulse, it wants to bring you into a state like a moon. Like, the moon is up in the sky. It's like this cinder. It's this inert material that couldn't be carried forward in our path of evolution, because it would have caused us to materialize too much, right? And I know this is difficult to understand, but that's what makes it worthwhile. Because, see, if you talk about and you bring it within the context of what Rudolf Steiner says about the Christ impulse and the mystery of Golgotha, and that when the crucifixion happened on the hill of Golgotha, that the blood entered into the earth, and you have the story of Joseph of Arimathea catching the holy blood in the Grail. And so you have the journey of the Grail and that whole image of the viaticum. And so when you look at that and you realize that that actually contains archetypally all these things that Douglas was just explaining. It's just that you can carry it as an image in your imagination, or you can try and abstract it into a bunch of formulas. But ultimately, like, well, when Douglas says pink, really a better way to look at it is like a rosy hued peach blossom. And it has this wonderful golden glow that's surrounding it. See, if you could just hold that thought in your mind, that will take you farther than volumes of reading. And that's the thing, is that we have these two different realms in which we live, in which we're conscious. We're conscious in our realm of wakefulness, but we dream in our feelings, and we're in deep dreamless sleep in our will. And so it's that whole idea of being able to enliven the realm of the etheric within your own being by availing yourself of that rosy peach blossom golden hued drop, and that it's actually a super sensible reality that you're. And so when you approach this, what it does is it creates a bridge. And the image that Goethe gives in the fairy tale of Lily and the Green Snake is that what happens? Well, the snake turns into a golden bridge. And that's essentially, that's the process itself. I used to read the fairy tale of the Lily and the Green Snake by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe every New Year's Eve, rather than going out and trying to socialize and do all those dangerous things. I would just stay home and read this story, and it gives you the images that are this process that we're talking about.
Well, we have a book coming up on the Green Snake and Beautiful Lily, but then again, we have a book on everything. So the Green Snake and Beautiful Lily, to get across from the physical to the spiritual, the green snake can carry you as a bridge at a certain time of the day. Later, the snake gives up of itself to bring back the prince to life. Then they take the snake and he turns into gems, and they throw them in the river. And then the underground temple comes up, and then the bridge itself is made by itself. So when you take what's below in your lower chakras, you bring it up. You use Christ as the serpent and also the Kundalini force as the serpent to get you up there. It has to be transformed into the heart, into stones, into gems, into precious gems, right? So that Kundalini force will get you there. But then you have to transform it. You have to sacrifice yourself. And that's what the snake does, sacrifice itself for the life of someone else. And it turns his body into gems. They throw them into the river. And the river itself, which is the spirit, builds the bridge to the new temple. The temple is in your head. That's the Grail temple. So what John is saying, the Green Snake and Beautiful Lily it's everything there. But the point you made at the beginning, I want to focus on. Scientists don't believe what their five senses don't tell them. Well, you can't see plasma and you can't see the ethers. And by the way, I love this. This usually gets somebody at a dinner meeting with me when it's an astrophysicist or somebody like that, a really top scientist at a top university. They'll pick up a fork and a knife and want to attack me when I say, yes, but you guys think you can measure warmth. Warmth is super sensible. You can't see it. You only see its effects. Oh, you can't see light. And then I point out that in space, you can't see stars and you can't see the sun. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? Because you say it's empty, right? They say it's a void, which is nonsense. And that's where Irvin Laszlo goes wrong. It's not a void. And it's not just Akasha. It's Akasha holding the other six ethers. But anyway, they go short of this. And I always say to them, everything you think you're studying is invisible. Warmth, light, sound, life, gravity, electricity, water. Everything you think you can study is invisible, or it's a plasma in the cosmos, and it's not down here in the atmosphere of the earth, because this is the only place atoms exist. And Steiner and all of his followers say this a jillion trillion times. To try, and so to many great philosophers, to use the logic that you have derived down on Earth, looking at what you think are universal laws, and then to apply that to the cosmos is less than childish. It's stupid. The entire cosmos is 99.99% plasma. And then they say there's no plasma down here on Earth. Maybe some of the atmosphere. Oh, really? The whole universe is plasma, but there's no plasma down here. Isn't that interesting? And then you can say, and how about the strong force, the weak force? Every force of science is supersensible and invisible. And so don't be surprised when we're going to tell you that we're actually plasmoid beings. We use the vehicle of plasma. We're not plasmoid beings. We use the vehicle of the ethers and the plasmas to create life. Now let's go to, from the ancient Indian, where you have this very dynamic picture of a serpent, and it's the serpent, and what's it doing? It's winding around a tree. And that's your spinal cord and your head and everything. We're going to talk about the head. And what happens up here, it's a gigantic tree, and then with the earth and the aurora borealis and the geomagnetic field and the ozone and the atmospheres all describe it so perfectly, it's ridiculous. It's a tree. In our head, the cerebellum, if you cut it and look at it in a section of it, it's 12 limbs of a tree. And that's the life ether. And life ether is the tree of life. And the tree of life is a New Jerusalem. And what do you find there? It has 12 leaves for the healing of the nations. In other words, it's the whole picture of the zodiacs, of the stars. And then what comes out from the base of it? The waters of life. Well, Rudolf Steiner said the tree of life can be found in the cerebellum, because the cerebellum is the most perfect part of the brain. It took everything that all of the animals and insects and the plants and the minerals all learned and put it into one place, and that's the tree of life. Do we have access to it? No. That's your autonomic nervous system. We have a sympathetic, parasympathetic in the midbrain and the forebrain, and he says that you can find the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the midbrain. The branches, if you look at the first and second the lateral ventricles of the brain, and the way it comes down into the third, goes down into the fourth, and creates this entire cavity that's filled with cerebral spinal fluid, that every time you breathe and every time your heart beats, it causes a rhythm to go up your spine and into that. And if there's a canal that sits in the fourth ventricle, and if the pineal gland, which sits on the corpus quadragemini, a cube, and there's a cube in the heart too, but in the head, the Grail Castle is described as Steiner and Manly P. Hall and many, many others as the pineal gland. Literally, they know this now. Until it stands upright, it can't emit piezoelectric generation of energy, bioelectric energy, into the cerebral spinal fluid from the pineal gland, from the calcium carbonate crystals. And the more you have, the bigger your halo, the bigger your aura, the smarter you are, the more you can generate energy in your body. And it sends that as an bioelectric charge through the Grail, the third ventricle of the brain, where the first and second are dropping down sodium and chloride and all these particles that are now in a magnetic, first off, they're in a magnetic field, because the flow of blood creates one. Wherever it goes in your body, there's a magnetic field. And that causes plasma. Plasma goes along magnetic field lines. And so this is the bioluminescence, which is literally plasma. That's another name for plasma in the body. Phosphorescence, which is phosphorus in the body. And all interchanges are not done simply to create the energy in the body by calcium and sodium and potassium. No, not at all. The energy in the body is created by adenosine triphosphate, which tells gives the mitochondrial DNA in your cell to the energy to be able to digest glucose, fats, and other things that come into your cell, right? So where do you find this? Crown chakra, phosphorus. And so adenosine triphosphorus can literally become a charged plasma charge, a bioelectric plasmic charge that goes up and, like a lightning bolt, strikes your pituitary gland. And this is the etherization of the blood I'm describing. but this is what happens in the brain. This is the cosmic and earthly nutrition. Kundalini gets you there. It can get the pineal to stand, but then you have to have something to send across, information. And what's the information you should be sending across? I wish to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. If you have nothing but love, then it's going to send it across. It's going to charge all those sodium and chloride particles and all the other things that are in cerebral spinal fluid, because that's how you create a magnetohydrodynamic generator. Is you create an enriched flow of fluid that has metals in it. That's what your blood is. And we're going to go in a minute to the heart and show you that there's one in the heart. So it goes across and zaps the pituitary gland. And if it does, then the pituitary gland from its two lobes excretes two things. One of them is pituitrin, and one of them is very much like that. And that causes the best nutrition that your nerves and your blood system can receive. So pituitrin, they don't use that for anything. Why? Because it's an excretion from one of the two master glands of the body, the pituitary gland, which controls the rest of the body. But what controls the whole body? The pineal gland. When you were born, how big you were, your entire metabolic system is not only controlled by your hypothalamus, but it's also your thalamus, your hypothalamus, and your pituitary. It's controlled by the pineal. Gigantism, your experience of time, your experience of intelligence, all your senses come through the 11 cranial nerves, come to the corpus callosum. I mean, the corpora quadragemini, the square that's broken up into 8 pieces that the pineal gland sits on. So the nerves come in here, and the pineal gland reads what the corpora quadragemini tells it. And from the back comes the vagus nerve to tell it everything from below the heart. So the pineal gland is the master gland that receives all of the not only neurological information, but also blood information and blood chemistry information that then controls your whole body. That's what you're trying to do. That's the first stage. Second stage is it comes down and pierces your heart, causes your heart through this process of etherization of the blood to start a stream going from your heart to your head. So the ancient Indians described it that way. The ancient Greeks described it as Mercury's caduceus, which is he holds at the heart, doesn't he? It almost always shows him holding it at the heart, and it shows a serpent, 2 serpents, Ida and Pingala, going around a central pole, Sushumna, and it goes up until it turns into the brainstem and turns into the medulla oblongata, and off to the side are these wings. Those are the first and second, the lateral ventricles. And so you see a picture of this exact process in Mercury. And what happens when he holds this up? He has wings on his head, doesn't he? That's what's called the etheric heart. And that is the result of the etherization of the blood over a long period of time. Humans will have another part of their head that grows. Well, these are the wings of Mercury. But before he can do it, and before he can be the messenger of the god, just like all these things are messages and information being sent from all over the body to the heart as a supersensible organ to perceive it, he can't go anywhere without the wings on his feet, can he? He can't be the messenger of the gods. And he's mercurial. He's both physical and spiritual. He can go into the underworld. So what we're looking at with the caduceus is another image that taught people in the past as much as we're trying to tell you in 2 hours, me talking, and John doesn't talk as fast as I do, but if I talked as fast as I could not explain this to you in 2 hours for what is held in the image of the caduceus. And the last image I'm going to give you for Christians is the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Mary. Look at the symbols. What's the Sacred Heart? This is when I was young, I said, this is it. As a Catholic, that's all I meditated on, the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Why? Because it shows a spear, the spear of Longinus, or the sword of Michael, piercing the heart so it starts to bleed, and it shows that it's bleeding down below, right? These are the things below the heart coming up, really. What does the heart blood tell the heart? And then around the heart is the thorn of crowns, which looks exactly like DNA, doesn't it? And it looks exactly like what plasma does in its first creation. Plasma creates something that looks exactly like a helical DNA, okay? And each of the thorns, those look like the cross sections of DNA, and it's around the heart and it's squeezing it. And then what do you have? Above it, there's a fire, and around it is a radiance, a glowing. And around that are 12 stars or 12, usually seraphs or cherubims. And then above that is sometimes a vessel above the fire. So in the heart, there's a vessel sometimes, and coming out of the vessel is the cross. And what is the cross? That would be representing the cross of the four elements of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and phosphorus. What is it telling us? The Sacred Heart of Jesus is telling us what the heart really does, because the clairvoyants in the past drew it that way because they saw it that way. So whether you want to look at Kundalini, which is the past, that doesn't work anymore. That's not going to be what we're going to talk about next, which is the frontal spinal column. Or you could talk about the caduceus of Mercury. Notice that it can go here going up from the heart and it has 3 chakras and then the opening, or it can go down here to the lowest chakra, come up, and then the heart has wings called the auricles. And those auricles have everything to do with the vagus nerve's adjustment for the beating of the heart and how much plasmic direct current is produced to create the magnetic field that engulfs our entire body. So Rudolf Steiner pointed out, and a few other people, and this is the biggest secret. I saved it to the end so that people who couldn't digest the first part, you won't even have to hear this. There's another spinal column in the front, and Steiner called it the frontal spinal column, and it goes from the heart to the head. So once Kundalini comes up, goes down, causes the shock. It causes the pituitary to go down to the heart. That's the spear or the sword. It pierces the heart and opens the heart, because pituitary causes the heart to become extremely healthy and the nerves the same, and starts this process of going upward. Now, that's the caduceus. That's the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The ancient Indians don't talk about it. But the ancient Chinese have transformed what they knew from the past from their clairvoyance, and the ancient Hindus do the same thing. They have a thing called a Sintamani tree, which is the tree of the universe that grows from your heart to your head and grows out into the cosmos. Sintamani, Mani is Hail Thou Jewel in the Om Mani Padme Hum, Hail Thou Jewel in the heart of the lotus. The lotus is the heart. The jewel is the wish-fulfilling stone. In other words, it's the diamond that is created from carbon that is held back in your breath that starts the process of the etherization of the blood. And Avalokitesvara, the great being of compassion who represents Christ in those ancient Indian traditions, Avalokitesvara holds the wish-fulfilling stone in his heart. And what happens? The energy goes up, and when it gets to his throat, he says, "Oh my, I can hear the sounds of everyone suffering. I need 10,000 arms to reach out to help them to experience their suffering, and then 10,000 spiritual tools to heal their suffering." And then it goes up even further to here. And when it reaches that, Avalokitesvara, who's also called Chinrezig, the being of compassion, who's also male, female, who's also called Avalokitesvara, as well as Vajrayogini and many other names, Uma and many other names. In the ancient times is called Durga. But this being, when it reaches the hydrogen, or the part of your third eye, what does it do? It sees everything. But because it sees everything as a human, it's given the ability to split open. So the head splits. And this is what Steiner basically says. The back of the head opens up and your heart rises up and becomes the etheric heart. And then essentially what happens is you're going into the spiritual world, the illusory realm at that time. And so for Avalokitesvara, what has to happen? Boom, 11 more heads pop out of her head. Now she has 12 heads. Now, mind you, everything I've talked about here, the 12 stars, the radiance, okay, this being is also on fire. And these beings that we're talking about are usually on fire and emanating light, and that they are sacrificing themselves and they're drinking blood. Okay. So in all of these things, what is the bowl that Vajrayogini is holding? It's the blood that she's drinking from her previous teacher. In other words, it's the wisdom in his blood that she's drinking. So no matter what image you want to talk about, in the next talk, we're going to go into the absolute elemental details of this in case you're interested in knowing how you can do this. And because really, this is the process of spiritual development that everybody wants in every single tradition.
Yes, and like what I said, it's helpful to be able to develop an imaginative picture to bear you. It's you have the image of Lohengrin. He's riding in the swan. There's like this swan boat, and he's riding across the Rhine in a swan boat. And what is that? That winged nature. And so you go, well, if I boiled this down to one simple thing, what would I call it? Well, in the lecture that I referenced earlier on the etherization of the blood, Rudolf Steiner, when he's referring to this process of uniting your blood that's bathing the pineal and pituitary with the etherization of the Christ nature, he calls it a moral fire. It's like, I don't know, but the first time that I encountered that, it's like it rings you like a bell because that's the bottom line, like what you get it in a more abstract approach, like, and to serve all sentient beings and all these really high-minded concepts. But you have to be able to take it beyond a high-minded concept. Like Rudolf Steiner, he would crack jokes about moralizing, and talking about that, because it's not about talking about it. It's about bringing it into your will, because that's the realm in which you are unconscious. And so when you go to sleep at night and you're not conscious, you're not dreaming, you're unconscious. That's that realm, see? And again, like we referenced in a previous episode, that Rudolf Steiner talks about how the brain, when you're
So one of the last details we'll give you in this talk is that the vagus nerve, the scientists will say, gives a tone to the heart, to these sinonodes in the heart, in the atrium in the ventricle of the right side of the heart. And so the vagus nerve is bringing up sound, tones to the heart. And then the heart hears these tones, and it tells the heart everything about the entire body, and particularly the organs of the body and how they're doing. And then what does the heart do? It creates a frequency, and that frequency is called a heart vortex ring. And now they know that the heart vortex ring, there's 4 of them at least in the heart, and the major one that they say pushes the blood is the frequency of what a defibrillator hits your heart with to start it up again. So the heart, through the vortex rings, are creating sound. The vagus nerve is bringing sound, and then the nerves going up into the brain are bringing all the senses, so that the pineal gland can sit there as the master on the summit, making decisions about the rest of the body, and then making conscious decisions, because it's in the pineal gland really that we direct so many things from the heart. But if the pineal gland hasn't been warmed by the heart, and as Steiner says, if you do not have warmed up thoughts, then you will not have what it takes to have that moral fire that John just made reference to. So thank you, John, for being with us today and bringing that. We're going to continue these deeper secrets in the next talk, and that's where you're going to have trouble probably holding me back, because I'm going to go way out in the weeds. Thanks again, John.